Still trying to figure out how I want to do my filming setup in this new location. I don't know. Anyway, hi everyone, it's Anna. Welcome back to my BookTube channel. I am really trying to make an effort to post more consistently. It's just been like the last year has been crazy with moving across country, starting a new job, doing all this other stuff, and just, the tumult. But I have been getting more into reading consistently, and this is going to be kind of a catch-up on what I'm reading recently, a little bit of an existential crisis about where I am as a reader right now, and then just whatever else strikes my fancy. So let's go ahead and wrap up the disability readathon first. I read a couple of poetry books, and I read the Anti-Ableist Manifesto, which was the group book by Tiffany Yu. Really liked the book. I think it's a good book, especially if you have like a discussion group or a book group or perhaps some like employee resource group at your job or some place where you volunteer and you're looking into making it a more accessible environment. Even as somebody for whom not a ton of this was like new information, I found the discussion questions to be really thought-provoking, and I think there's something there for people at all levels of like familiarity and comfort with talking about disability. Really liked it. I would definitely recommend you read that. I didn't read a ton this past month, to be perfectly honest. I have been reading the same fiction books since, I don't know, it's probably taken me like 2 months to finish it, and I finished it just this morning, and then I've been reading a lot of nonfiction. That's kind of what my readerly crisis is about at this point, because I seem to have like completely switched what my preferences are when it comes to reading without realizing it until one day I looked at my Storygraph stats and I noticed that this year 2/3 of the books that I've read have been nonfiction and only 1/3 have been fiction. And I was like, what? Now, if you've been a long time watcher, you know that generally when I go through like periods of stress or upheaval, my fiction reading kind of goes down a little bit because I find it really difficult to get invested in like fictional characters' emotional drama, even if it's, romance levels of emotional drama where I know they're going to be happy at the end. It's just like too much to deal with. But I also have really just found myself way more drawn to reading nonfiction. And I don't know, I don't know why that is, and I don't know why it bothers me that I can't figure it out. That's the other thing that I think is contributing to the feeling of this being a reading crisis, is that I feel like this just happened suddenly, and I'm like, did my tastes majorly change? When was the last time I read sci-fi or fantasy? When was the last time I even sat down and read a romance novel? And the novel that I just finished, which was very good, Milkman by Anna Burns, is a literary fiction Man Booker Prize 2018 winner. I have not sat down to read literary fiction like this in a while, it feels like. I don't think since pre-COVID have I really sat down and been like, no, I'm going to read something that's super dense and literary in this way. Not that this is dense, it's a pretty challenging book. It's one of the most rewarding books I've read all year. I definitely really enjoyed the experience of reading it, but it took me a long time. And that's just because it's sometimes really difficult to focus in on what exactly is going on in this book because of the way that the language is used, who the characters are. None of them are called by their actual names. They're all defined in their relationships with each other. So like the main character, middle sister, really just starts out as that being her only identity. I'll talk a little bit about this book now because it seems like I'm getting into it. And I just finished it this morning, so it's still fresh in my mind. So this takes place in an unnamed city in Ireland in the 1970s during the Troubles. Like I said, middle sister is the main character, and the gist of the book is that she kind of attracts the attention of a much older man. She's like 16, and I think it's intimated he's like 40 something, that she refers to as Milkman. And he's like a paramilitary that is basically stalking her. And all she really wants to do is kind of fade into the background of her life and like not be noticed. But because of all of the sectarian violence that's going on in Ireland at this time, she kind of can't help but draw people's attention because this man has taken such an interest in her. So she is being swept up in what they only ever refer to as the political problems in this book, even though she doesn't want to be, even though she's kind of in this maybe relationship with her maybe boyfriend. That is what he's called in the book, is maybe boyfriend. And she's really trying to piece together who she is in the midst of all this, especially when it becomes clear she can no longer like fade to the background and be ambivalent or indifferent about her own identity. She has to take a stand and decide who she is and decide what she cares about. This is a tough book to read. It just reminds me a lot of, again, like longtime viewers will remember me reading Cranachilly, which is Graveyard Clay by Martin O'Caden. And this book reminded me a lot of that. The way that the language is written is very similar to a lot of the like oral Irish storytelling of mythology, where sometimes like tense and speaker and mood are not as clear as they would be normally if you're thinking of like writing in English, even though this is written in English and Cranachilly was not. That was written in Irish. So it's tough to follow at times, but definitely worth sticking with. And I don't want to give away too much because I still think like the plot is kind of amazing to experience as it unfolds. But I was a little worried that the ending was going to be like really dark and unredeemable, and it wasn't. And I'm happy about that. Like it actually had a slightly hopeful ending, which was a relief after how heavy some of the subject matter in this book is. So yeah, it took me like 2 months, I think, to actually read this book. And it's good that I finished it now because it needs to go back to the library badly. I've had it out for a really long time. As for nonfiction, what I'm reading right now is The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness by Jonathan Haidt. Like a lot of nonfiction books, this is kind of what it says it is on the cover. This really reads a lot more like a collection of articles that got turned into a book, and I think that the author actually has had a Substack he's been keeping for several years, and he like collected a bunch of his Substack posts that kind of went into making this book. So it is, I think, unnecessarily repetitive in places. I'm about halfway through the book, and it definitely seems like he's repeating information that might not be so noticeable were you to maybe subscribe to the Substack and you don't read every single issue that comes out. But as someone who's like, but I just read this last chapter, I'm like, that is a little bit in need of editing, perhaps. But I do really find the book interesting. Again, it's not like I'm learning a ton of new information because I do work with children, I do work as a teacher. I kind of see firsthand in my workday the effects that social media and device use have on children, elementary age children in particular, because that's the target population that I work with. But yeah, I'm also a little bit biased because I teach them outdoors, and so a lot of people are like, the kids still show the effects of devices, but they are also self-selecting to be in an outdoor program that is in theory electronics free. Whether that actually works out in practice all of the time is a little bit different, but you know. So a lot of this stuff I'm familiar with, like the importance of risky play, like taking age-appropriate risks, developmentally appropriate risks for children, which are distinct from hazards, but things like, you know, going on those old merry-go-rounds that they used to have at playgrounds where it's like, yeah, you learn best how to be a kid by playing and taking risks where there is like actually a chance that you could get hurt, not an inordinately high chance and not like seriously injured, but that is kind of how you learn to be a kid. It's how you learn to become more confident, is that experience and risk taking and having embodied interactions with your peers and with older children so you can learn how to be what he calls a successful older child. So the main thesis of the book is that as childhood has gradually migrated from these in-person embodied experiences, being how kids spend most of their time, to a world that is mostly online and mediated through devices, that children are actually becoming less confident, more anxious, more depressed for a variety of different reasons, because they're not actually developing the skills that they need to become confident and to learn and to be able to regulate their own emotions. So for me, this is kind of a thing that I see in practice every day. You can tell which kids spend more time on screens than others. You just can. It's all they can think about or all they can talk about. Those are the kids that tend to have more difficulty with things like emotional regulation. And it's really tough as a teacher because there's only a limited amount of things you can do to mitigate that in your class, right? So it's got some actually like useful practical tips on how parents, but also how we as a society, like either through regulation or legislation or something like that, could kind of help address this mental health epidemic that we're having by rethinking our relationship to devices and our children. He's got this theory that while the world has become overprotective of children in the quote unquote real world, it's become completely like hands off, no guardrails, underprotective online. And I think like this is something that everyone should be aware of, whether you have children or not, because we are all going to have to live together in a society and we all need to be engaged in the world around us, you know. So right now I'm on a chapter about how social media affects girls and boys' perceptions of themselves and what like mental health challenges excessive social media use can create in both girls and boys. And it's not looking good, people. It's not looking good. So definitely a good book, if a little bit repetitive. And then I have a couple new ones that I am going to be starting relatively soon. I'm also planning on doing the Queer Lit Readathon, which takes place for the whole month of June for Pride Month, but I'm still waiting on some library books to come in before I make my official TBR for that readathon. So let's begin with a first that happened to me for the first time ever. I was sent a book in the mail from the publisher. That has never happened to me before, and I've been on BookTube since like 2017, 2018, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing, cool. And this is Owning It, Our Disabled Childhoods in Our Own Words, which is an anthology edited by Jen Campbell and James and Lucy Catchpole. So you know that this is one of my most anticipated reads of the year. It is not out in the United States yet. It came out at the end of April in the UK. And Faber, the publisher, actually reached out to me and asked if I would like a free copy of the book. And I said yes, because I'm really excited to read it. This has essays that are from a variety of different people that you may know from like disability social media, people like Rebecca Taussig and Imani Barbarin, as well as a few different writers and artists that I'm already aware of. And I'm really looking forward to reading this. I've never heard of or seen a book like this before. I've also never, I think there's one book out there that's an essay collection that is written by parents who are disabled. A lot of times it's the other way around, books that are written for the like non-disabled parents of disabled children. And I'm looking for books where the parents themselves are disabled. So if you know any, I know of, I think it's called We've Got This, which is the anthology, and Rebecca Taussig's memoir about her becoming a mom as a wheelchair user. And yeah, that's just about it. So if you know of any others, let me know. Excited to start that when I finish The Anxious Generation. And then we have another anthology, but this is edited by Michael Lewis, which is why I got it, called Who is Government? The Untold Story of Public Service. Like his book about COVID, which was called, The Premonition, I think like he had a lot of this probably written and ready to go before the current president of the United States was elected for the second time. But I think that like the events that are happening in the US right now, particularly the gutting of the civil service, the massive defunding of the best parts of the federal government, you know, like the parts of the government that I actually want my taxes to go to instead of paying to bomb children. And yeah, I'm just like, oh, this is going to be a really interesting read. And then this happened and I went, oh, this is going to be an interesting read. Apparently this is also like started as a Washington Post opinion series, and it's got a lot of great thinkers and writers who wrote essays about like the government's unelected officials, the civil servants. This is going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Although this may be one of those things where I need a palate cleanser after, because I keep reading books about very serious and heavy topics and things that are happening in current events. And then I keep wondering why I feel like sad and very weepy as I'm getting ready to go to sleep. So if you have recommendations for better things to read before bed, I would also love to hear those. Also, if you have any queer lit recommendations for the readathon coming up, I have got the group book from the library, it's on the way, and then a couple of others on the way too. Please let me know that too. Thank you all very much for watching this video. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.